Question 1.
You will hear a tourist asking about cruises round the harbour. First, look at questions 1 to 7. Now listen to the first part of the conversation and complete questions 1 to 7 on the table.
Good morning, Blue Harbour Cruises. How can I help you?
Oh, good morning. Can you tell me something about the different cruises you run?
Well, we run 3 cruises every day, each offering something slightly different.
Oh, let me just get a pencil so I can make a note of this. Right.
Firstly, there's the Highlight Cruise, then we do the Noon Cruise, and we also have our Coffee Cruise.
Could you tell me a bit about them? When they leave, how often, that sort of thing?
Well, the Highlight Cruise is $16 per person, and that leaves at 9:30 every morning and takes 2 hours to go around the harbour.
Right, 9:30. And do you get coffee or refreshments?
No, but there's a kiosk on board where you can buy drinks and snacks, and we do provide everyone with a free souvenir postcard.
Right.
And then there's our Noon Cruise at $42 per person. This is more expensive, but of course it takes longer, and for that price you get a 3-course lunch.
Oh, that sounds good. And what about the last one?
That's the Coffee Cruise. Well, that's $25 each. It takes 2.5 hours.
When does that leave?
At 2:15 daily?
And presumably the coffee is included?
Yes, and sandwiches are served free of charge.
Now you have some time to look at questions 8 to 10. As you listen to the rest of the conversation, answer questions 8 to 10.
I think the coffee cruise would suit us best, as lunch is included at the hotel. Can I book for 2 people for tomorrow, please?
No need to book, just be down at the quay at 2 o'clock. All our cruises depart from jetty number 2.
Can you tell me where that is exactly?
Yes, number 2 jetty is opposite the shops. It's clearly signposted.
Right. And can you tell me, is there a commentary?
Yes, there's a commentary on all the cruises.
Is it possible to listen to the commentary in Japanese? My friend doesn't speak much English.
It's in English only, I'm afraid, but the tour guides usually speak some Japanese, so she'll be able to ask questions.
Oh, fine.
Oh, and one other thing. I should just mention that it gets extremely hot on the upper deck at this time of year, so it's a good idea to wear a hat. Otherwise, you could get quite badly sunburnt.
Right, I'll remember that. Thanks very much.
That is the end of Section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You will hear a speaker from the hotel industry addressing a group of young people about careers with her firm. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good morning. It's a great pleasure to be here in London and to see so many people interested in working in hotels. We in the International Finest Group of hotels are very proud of our business, and we are always on the lookout for quality recruits in every department. Now, I'm going to outline some of the areas of work where we are currently recruiting and the essential skills or qualifications for them. Then I'll run through our recruitment procedure, okay? At the moment, we're looking for a number of people for administrative posts in different parts of the world, and also some roles which involve a lot of travelling. One of our main business streams is hosting special events for other businesses. If you have good communication and organisational skills, with a good level of fluency in at least one European and one non-European language, I'd suggest you think about becoming part of the team which sets up these events for all our centres. This would mean being based full-time in our London office. The work ranges from setting up small meetings a few days ahead to organising international conferences 2 years in advance, so there's plenty of variety. Some of the conferences we run have as many as 1,000 delegates, so it's quite challenging. Then there are some posts available for professionals in the catering field. Chefs we can find. It seems this is a popular career choice in many parts of the world, as in the UK these days, in spite of the exacting standards. But people to manage catering departments need more than a love of producing quality food. We're after really energetic and totally efficient young managers who already have the relevant business qualifications, no training on the job here, and they must share the team's determination to make everything run smoothly at any time of the day or night. Or if you are the type of person who enjoys a challenge, what about becoming one of our relief housekeepers? You'll be a good people person, well organised and supremely flexible. As well as covering UK holidays, maternity and paternity leave, there will be times when you have to fill a key post when someone's sick, which could be anywhere in our European, Middle Eastern or Far Eastern hotels, so you must be prepared to hop on a plane at 5 minutes' notice. The International Finest brand name attracts visitors from all over the world and on all kinds of business and leisure trips. Our swimming pools and gyms need to be run by people with the highest standards of customer service. You don't have to be a great athlete, but smart appearance and a pleasant manner are necessary. A diploma in sports science would be the minimum requirement here. Lastly, I'd just like to mention that the main London office has another vacancy. Most bookings come online, especially from the Far East, for people coming to Europe. If you have fluency and some keyboard skills in, for example, Spanish or any Far Eastern languages, either having taken a degree or preferably from having lived and worked overseas, you might be just the person we're looking for to deal with email bookings and queries in the office here. A flexible attitude to working hours is also important, as you may have to come in outside normal office hours.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20.
Pause the recording for 30 seconds.
Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
So that's an overview of the kind of jobs. Now, how to get them. First of all, provided you have a UK work permit, you can go online and register an interest in working for us. By return, you'll receive a unique applicant's code, which is your personal identification number and which we'll use in all communications. Along with that, you get access to the Human Resources website, where you should make sure you understand the legal terms and conditions which apply to all our employees. That's also where you can then download the application form, Fill it in and send it back along with your CV. You'll know within 48 hours whether you're being considered as you get an automated response. Sorry if it's a bit impersonal, but at least it's quick. Hopefully, if we like the sound of you, there will be in that automated response a list of times for an initial interview which will take place by telephone during the following week. You confirm by email which of the time slots will suit you. Provided the interview is satisfactory, at that point we'll ask for any evidence of qualifications required, which might be your degree or diploma certificate or so on, which you have to send certified copies of, and we contact your referees. The last thing you have to do is you come along and have a look round the International Finest Group head office, get to know some of our team in human resources face to face, and participate in a one-day recruitment seminar, which involves a number of group and individual activities, along with other potential employees. Then, with luck, we'll offer you a job. So I hope you like the sound of joining our organisation.
That is the end of Section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3 on page 69. Section 3. You will hear two university students, Phil and Stella, talking to their tutor about their research project. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 27 on pages 69 and 70. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 27.
Come in. Ah, yes, Stella. Is Phil there too?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Come on in. OK, so you're here to discuss your research project. Have you decided what to focus on? You were thinking of something about the causes of mood changes, weren't you?
Yes, but the last time we saw you, you suggested we narrowed it down to either the effects of weather or urban environment. So we've decided to focus on the effects of weather.
Right, that's more manageable. So your goal is, Phil?
To prove the hypothesis, no. To investigate the hypothesis that the weather has an effect on a person's mood.
Good. And what's your thesis, Stella?
Well, our thesis is that in general, when the weather's good, it has a positive effect on a person's mood, and bad weather has a negative effect.
Can you define your terms here? For example, what do you mean by good and bad?
OK, well, good would be sunny, warm weather, and bad would be when it's cold and cloudy or raining.
And how would you define an effect on a person's mood? What would you be looking to find?
An effect on the way a person feels.
A change in the way they feel, like from feeling happy and optimistic to sad and depressed.
Right. And what sort of weather variables will you be looking at?
Oh, sunshine, temperature, cloudiness, precipitation, among others. It'll depend a bit what the weather's like when we do the survey.
Fine. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, what about background reading? I gave you some suggestions. Did you manage to read any of it?
Yes. We read the Ross Vickers article, the one comparing the groups of American Marines training in summer and winter. That's quite relevant to our study. It was interesting because the Marines who were training in the cold winter conditions tried to cheer themselves up by thinking of warm places, but it didn't really work.
Yes, they were trying to force themselves to have a positive mental outlook, but in fact it had the opposite effect, and they ended up in a very negative state of mind.
And we found some more research by someone who wasn't on the reading list you gave us, George Whiteborn. He compared people living in 3 countries with very different climatic conditions. Actually, he looked at several things, not just the weather. But he found some people's reactions to bad weather were much worse than others, and it was linked to how stressed they were generally. The weather on its own didn't have such a significant effect on mood.
And we looked at a paper by
Haverton.
Yeah, he broke weather up into about 15 or 16 categories and did qualitative and quantitative research. He found that humans respond to conditions in the weather with immediate responses, such as fear or amazement. But these responses can also be linked to associations from their earlier life, such as a particular happy or sad event.
Did you have a look at Stanfield's work?
Yes. It was interesting because the type of questions he asked was similar to what we were planning to use in our survey.
Yes.
He asked people how they were feeling on days with good and bad weather. He found the biggest factor seemed to be the humidity. Moods were most negative on days with a lot of rainfall. Long periods without sunshine had some effect, but nothing like as much.
That could be quite a useful model for your project.
Yes, we thought so too. Although we can't continue our survey for as long as he did. He did his over a 6-month period.
You now have some time to look at questions 28 to 30 on page 70. Now listen and answer questions 28 to 30.
Right, well, you've made quite a good start. So, where are you going from here?
Well, we've already made the questionnaire we're going to use for the survey. It's quite short, just 8 questions. We're aiming to survey 20 people over a period of 3 months from October to December.
We can't specify the actual dates yet because it depends on the weather. We want to do the survey on days with a range of different weather conditions. And we'll just be working on campus, so our data will only be statistically sound for the student population here.
That's okay. Have you thought how you'll determine what will constitute each aspect of weather, and how many you're looking at?
We decided on 4. The amount of sunshine, cloudiness, temperature and precipitation. We thought we might use the internet to get data on weather conditions on the days we do the survey, but we haven't found the information we need, so we might have to measure it ourselves. We'll see.
Then we've got to analyse the results, and we'll do that using a spreadsheet, giving numeric values to answers. And then, of course, we have to present our findings to the class, and we want to make it quite an interactive session. We want to involve the class in some way in the presentation, maybe by trying to create different climatic conditions in the classroom, but we're still thinking about it.
I see. Well, that sounds as if you're on the right lines. Now, what I'd suggest that you think about, in addition to the work you...
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You will hear a geography student giving a presentation about sand to fellow students. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40.
Pause the recording for 1 minute.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
First, I would like to tell you how the Argus computerized photography system has helped marine researchers. Then I shall talk a bit about sand collecting. Well, Argus is the system Dr. Rob Holman developed when he was working at a research pier on the coast of North Carolina about 20 years ago. This pier stretches out over the water, and it's the longest research pier in the world, with an observation tower on the end of it. The researchers there make precise measurements of how the sand moves about under the waves. This research is critical to the study of beach erosion in places where the coastline is being worn away. The Argus system helps to solve the difficulties encountered by these researchers. The system correlates the data from under the water with what Dr. Holman gets from his fixed camera, which is mounted above the water on the pier and uses time-lapse photography. Some of Dr. Holman's results have changed the way people understand how sand moves. To quote S. Jeffries Williams, a coastal geologist with the United States Geological Survey, the system is a critical piece of new technology, and the Argus system allows us to quantify and document visually the changes to the coast on a variety of different time frames. A lot of these take place when there is a storm, or at other times when it is difficult to have people out on the beach making observations and taking measurements. Up to now, Argus installations have been installed in places in Oregon, California, Hawaii, England, the Netherlands, Australia, New Zealand, Spain, Italy and Brazil, as well as in North Carolina. Now, I'd like to introduce Dr. Holman's sand collection. He started collecting sand in the 1980s, and he still collects it now, even though he has around 1,000 samples. They come from his travels and from geologists and amateurs all over the world, and the collection includes sand from each continent, including Antarctica. People send him sand in envelopes, plastic bags, paper towels and all sorts. Each is stored in a glass jar, which Dr. Holman labels by latitude and longitude of its origin, as well as he can work them out. Sometimes the information is a bit sketchy. Anyway, it's mainly geology students at the university who study his collection, and they can learn a lot from it. For instance, one set of tubes displays sand from the east coast of the US, so you can see that the sand gets lighter and finer from north to south. By the time a grain of sand eventually washes up on a beach in Florida, at the southern end of that journey, it has been battered by waves for a long time, so the grains are fine and rounded, because most of the time sand is not stationary on the beach. Okay, so if you'd like to collect sand and maybe even send some to Dr. Holman, how should you go about it? Well, the list of equipment is very short and easy to find, but you should keep a supply when you're travelling, as you never know when you'll come across an interesting sand sample. One really handy thing for digging sand, especially if it's hard or frozen, is a spoon. It's perfect for that. If you're travelling by air, it'll have to be plastic, but metal is preferable, as plastic tends to break. You need something to put the samples in that is damp-proof and easy to carry. You can just use plastic bags, but you need to record the location and date on the bag, so you must also have a permanent marker with you, because you can never assume you will remember where you gathered a sample from later on, and you don't want it to rub off before you get home. And that's about all you need in the field to collect sand. When you get home, your samples should be logged in a notebook or computer. You need to note the location and be really specific as to exactly whereabouts on the beach you gathered your sample, low tide mark, under cliff area, etc. Then you store your sample. You want to keep everything in good condition and avoid contamination. So first you make absolutely sure that each sample is perfectly dry. You don't need any complicated apparatus for this. You can just air it out on layers of newspaper, which is suitably absorbent. Most people find that's the best way. Then, lastly, but this is really important, before there can be any chance of confusing this later sample with another, you put it in a clean small bag or a jar, and you must stick an identification label on straight away. Some people put one inside as well, in case the outer label falls off, but that's up to you. Well, that's about all you need to know to get started as a sign collector.